So is Sudan about to break apart again? We already have Sudan and South Sudan. And with the recent capture of Al-Fasher by the RSF, Sudan might be about to break apart again. Now, for the past 2 years, we've been talking a lot about the war in Gaza and the war in Ukraine. But there's a much bigger and much more devastating war that has been happening in Sudan. Right now, the country is in ruins. Millions have fled their homes, entire cities have been destroyed, and the fighting between the army and the Rapid Support Force, the RSF, has turned into one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. So how did we get here? Well, Sudan was once one country. In fact, it was the largest country in Africa after gaining independence from the British and from Egypt in 1956. But ever since then, it has been trapped in a cycle of military coups, civil wars, and failed transitions. So Sudan's first coup came just 2 years after its independence in 1958, followed by another one in 1969, another one in 1985, and finally in 1989 when Omar al-Bashir seized power. Now you need to remember this name because it's going to become important. Now al-Bashir will rule Sudan for the next 30 years, blending military dictatorship with Islamist rule. Now in the early 2000s, the western region of Darfur rose up against al-Bashir's government, accusing it of neglect and discrimination. Now, to crush that rebellion, al-Bashir created the Rapid Support Forces, which was built out of Arab militias who were known as Janjaweed. They were accused of committing atrocities against civilians, and the campaign quickly turned into what the world called a genocide, with an estimated 300,000 people killed and over 2.5 million people displaced. Now, because of this, Omar al-Bashir became the first sitting head of state to be indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and genocide. Before we go any further, have you subscribed? Have you subscribed? If you haven't subscribed, please just click that subscribe button. I'm gonna be giving you more and more content about things going on in Africa and things going on all across the world. So please subscribe so that you won't miss anything. Now back to the video. Now, meanwhile, the civil war in the south kept raging, and after decades and decades of fighting, South Sudan finally broke off in 2011, and it took most of the country's oil wealth with it. So the split left North Sudan economically crippled and politically unstable. So by 2018, frustration started to boil over. The economy was collapsing, prices were rising, and the protest erupted nationwide. Then in April 2019, the army finally removed Omar al-Bashir from power. You probably remember some of these images. Now they did this with the Rapid Support Force support, which is ironic because they are playing a key role in removing al-Bashir, but al-Bashir created them to try to stay in power. Now, after al-Bashir's fall, a fragile power-sharing government was formed between civilians and the military. This was led by Abdel Fattah, who was head of the army, and Mohamed Mabdan Dagalo, who's better known as Hameti, and he is the leader of the Rapid Support Force. But the partnership didn't last long. In October 2021, the army staged another coup, removing the civilian government completely. Tension between the two, Burhan and Hameti, began immediately. Both of them wanted control over the country's future, and especially over the security forces. So by April 2023, this exploded into a full-blown war between the two former allies. And since then, the RSF has been gaining ground, capturing major cities, including Nyala, Wad Madani, and now Al-Fasher, which is the last major army stronghold in Darfur. So as you can see, the army is now keeping the eastern part, and the RSF is now keeping the western part. So that's the reason why many people are starting to say that there's a huge potential that this country might break up in half. And now the United Nations says that over 9 million people have been displaced, and though the real number is expected to be much higher. Now entire neighborhoods in Khartoum, the capital, have been reduced to rubble, and millions are at risk of famine. Foreign powers, though, have also become deeply involved. Reports suggest that the United Arab Emirates has been providing support to the RSF. Now, there's been a large amount of proof that has shown airplanes leaving the UAE and landing in Sudan, bringing weapons. And some of the weapons are the weapons that the UAE bought from China. They bought some of them from the United States. They bought some of them from Europe. And these weapons are being found in the hands of the RSF. Now, these countries like China, the United States, and European countries are not directly selling these weapons to the RSF, but the RSF is still getting hold of one of the most sophisticated weapons. That's because the UAE is buying them and then it transfers them to the RSF. So it's literally fueling the fire. Now, here is the reason why the UAE might be getting involved. You see, Sudan is very rich. It's very rich in gold and land. Now, it's one of Africa's largest producers of gold, and most of that gold is being smuggled out illegally through networks which are controlled by the RSF. And guess where all of that gold is going? To the UAE. You see, the UAE doesn't have a single gold mine, yet it's become the second largest gold exporters in the world without a mine. And investigations have showed that a lot of that gold comes straight from conflict zones like Sudan. So they are finding militias there, fueling the war, and then draining Africa's wealth out of Africa. At the same time, the UAE companies have been buying large tracts of agricultural land all across Africa, from Sudan to Ethiopia to Tanzania and Mozambique. They say that is for food security, but many see it as a new form of economic colonialization, where Africa's land and resources are once again being exploited to benefit others. And that's the bigger story here. Sudan's tragedy is not just about two generals who are fighting over power. No, it's about how foreign interests and local elites keep profiting from Africa's chaos while ordinary people pay the ultimate price. Once again, Africa is being plundered for its wealth, for gold, for oil, and for fertile land, while millions are displaced and left behind. And as Africans, I think we need to wake up from this, because unless we take control of our own resources, our own governments, and our own future, this story will keep repeating, from Sudan to the Congo to Mozambique to the Sahel and all over. Sudan's crisis is a warning that if Africa doesn't unite to protect itself, others will keep dividing it and draining it piece by piece. So far all we are getting is just condemnation from countries, but there's no one who is willing to intervene. And the African Union is nowhere to be found. The issue about the African Union is that it doesn't bite, and it keeps quiet when things like this are happening. We just had an election right now in Cameroon, and it sent a congratulation letter. I feel like at some point the AU needs to start standing a firm ground and saying that this we will not tolerate. But so far we are not there yet. So many people are saying that it's a civil war, but it's much more complex than that, because these people don't have the weapons. They can't produce the weapons in the country. So they're being fooled by outside forces. But I feel like Sudan is not being talked about as much as Gaza and Ukraine were being talked about. But it is time now to make sure that everybody knows who is involved, everybody knows what is going on. Because when people keep quiet, people die, and they die in vain. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe. We are trying to build a community here, and I know that many people are watching. I've seen thousands and thousands of people watching some of my videos, but many of them haven't subscribed. So please subscribe.